first thing I noticed when I came back to myself was the smell. Antiseptic and something floral. Fake flowers, the kind hospitals put in waiting rooms to make people feel less like they're dying. My mouth tasted like copper. My left side felt like it had been wrung out and hung to dry. I didn't open my eyes right away. I don't know why. Some instinct held me still. The same thing that makes you freeze when you hear a sound in the middle of the night and you're not sure yet if it's real. My mother's voice came first. Baby, baby, can you hear me? Her hand was on my arm. I knew that grip. She'd held my arm exactly like that the night my father had his heart attack, standing in a hallway not so different from this one. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to open my eyes and tell her I was okay and ask for water. But something in her voice stopped me. A tightness I'd never heard before, not grief, something more controlled than grief. She leaned close to my ear, and what she said made every muscle in my body go rigid. Don't open your eyes yet. Pretend you're still out. His family is on their way up. I lay still. I don't know how to explain what it's like to make yourself go limp when every nerve in your body is screaming. I focused on keeping my breathing slow, even. The kind of breathing that doesn't know anything. The kind of breathing that belongs to someone who isn't listening. The door opened, my mother-in-law's heels. I would know that sound anywhere. That particular sharp click that said the floor belonged to her. Crossed the room and stopped somewhere near the foot of my bed. How is she? Her voice had that texture it always got when she was performing concern. Warm on the surface, nothing underneath. Still unconscious, my mother said. Her voice was perfectly flat. The doctor said the swelling needs more time. A pause. Then my father-in-law's voice, lower, directed away from me. This is a problem. It's not a problem, my mother-in-law said quietly. It's a complication. There's a difference. If she wakes up and starts asking questions, she won't remember. The neurologist said head injuries from this kind of impact are unpredictable. She may not remember the week before. My father-in-law made a sound, low and unconvinced. And if she does? A silence that stretched. Then we handle it, my mother-in-law said. The way we handle everything? My mother said nothing. I heard her chair shift, and then they left, the heels clicking back across the floor, the door swinging shut. And I lay there in that white room with my eyes closed and the smell of fake flowers and the understanding that the accident that had put me here was not an accident at all. My name is Audrey. I'm a financial forensics analyst, the kind of accountant who gets called in when companies suspect someone has been stealing from them, or when a spouse is hiding assets in a divorce, or when numbers on paper don't match the numbers that should be there. I find what's missing. I find what's been moved. I've spent 12 years learning how money lies. I met my husband at a fundraising gala for a children's hospital. He was the kind of handsome that photographs. Well, tall, easy smile, the practiced warmth of someone who grew up shaking hands at parties. He told me his family was in commercial real estate. He told me his parents were difficult but loving, the way a lot of people describe difficult parents who are mostly just difficult. We dated for 2 years. He was attentive and patient, and he remembered the names of my friends and the anniversary of my father's death. And when he proposed, I cried the genuine kind of crying, not the performed kind. I signed a prenuptial agreement 6 weeks before the wedding. I'm not embarrassed to say I didn't read it closely enough. I know what that sounds like. I do this for a living. I find the things other people miss in documents, but I want to explain something about the particular blindness of being in love when you also happen to be exhausted. I was working a federal embezzlement case that had been running 18 months. I was sleeping 5 hours a night. My mother-in-law sent the agreement through her family attorney with a note that said it was standard, and my husband sat across from me at our kitchen table and said, "It just protects both of us." And I believed him the way you believe someone when you've built your whole future around the assumption that they're telling the truth. I signed it. I would spend the next 9 months regretting that. The accident happened on a Tuesday in November. I was driving home from a client meeting, taking the long way because I needed to think, and I think better moving. The intersection was one I crossed hundreds of times. The light was green. I know it was green because I had just thought, specifically, clearly, I need to call my mother tonight. And then there was a sound like the world ending. And then nothing. I woke up in the hospital with a fractured collarbone, 2 cracked ribs, and a concussion bad enough that my vision went sideways every time I moved my head too fast. The other vehicle, I learned this later, had run a red light going 47 miles per hour. The driver left the scene. The plates came back to a rental car. The rental was paid for in cash at a location with a broken security camera. My mother had been there within an hour. She'd sat with me through the night. And when she leaned down and told me to keep my eyes closed, I trusted her completely, the way I had trusted her my whole life, even when I didn't understand why. I kept my eyes closed and I listened to my in-laws discuss how to manage me, and when they left, I finally let myself breathe. My mother held my hand. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then, how much did you hear? Enough, I said. She pressed my hand tighter. I got here first, before them. And I saw. She stopped. Started again. There was a man in the hallway. He was on his phone. He saw me go into your room and he made a call, and 20 minutes later they were here. I don't know who he was, but I know what I felt. What she felt was what I felt. The same cold certainty. I need you to listen to me, she said. Don't let them know you're awake yet. Not until you figure out what you're doing. Promise me. I promised her. I was kept in the hospital for 4 days. During that time, I let myself be unconscious when my in-laws visited, and mostly lucid but vague when my husband sat beside me. He held my hand and told me how scared he'd been, and brought me flowers, real ones, not the fake kind. And I watched his face for signs of the thing I feared, and found nothing I could name. He looked like a man whose wife had been in an accident. He looked like a man who loved his wife. But I had also spent 12 years learning that people who are good at deception look exactly like people who are telling the truth. On the 3rd night, I asked a nurse for a notepad and a pen, and I started writing down every financial detail of my marriage that I could remember. My husband and I had commingled significant assets. My savings, a small inheritance from my father, money I'd set aside from years of bonuses. We had a joint account and a joint investment portfolio. We'd bought a condo together 18 months ago. His name was on my retirement account as beneficiary. I had given him access to my financial life the same way I had given him my signature on that prenuptial agreement, without reading carefully enough. Because I trusted him. I wrote for 2 hours. Then I folded the paper and held it against my chest until I fell asleep. The prenup was the first thing I looked at when I got home. I told my husband I needed to rest. He set me up on the couch with pillows and a blanket and went to work. The moment his car left the driveway, I called the attorney I used for contract review, not the one my mother-in-law had suggested when we got engaged, a different one, someone who owed me nothing, and asked her to come over. She arrived with coffee and read the document at my kitchen table while I watched her face. She set it down carefully. Audrey. Tell me. Clause 11, she said. Recapture provision. If the marriage ends for any reason within 10 years, and your net worth at time of dissolution exceeds his by more than 40%, the excess is subject to division. I stared at her. That's not standard. It is not, she agreed. What does that mean in practical terms? She folded her hands. It means that the money you brought into the marriage, the money you earned during the marriage, the money from your father, all of it is potentially on the table, because you've been more financially successful than him. I've been more financially successful than him by a significant margin. She nodded. I sat with that for a moment. I thought about the inheritance I'd put into the joint account without thinking twice. I thought about my bonuses, direct deposited into the account I shared with my husband for 2.5 years. I thought about my name on a condo that had appreciated considerably since we'd bought it. Someone, I said slowly, would benefit enormously from this marriage ending, specifically from this marriage ending in a way where I'm impaired, where I can't think clearly, where I might not notice what's happening to the accounts. My attorney looked at me very steadily. Have you checked your accounts recently? I hadn't. I'd been in the hospital. I checked them then, while she sat across from me, and what I found was the beginning of a pattern I recognized from my professional life. Small movements. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet redistribution that wouldn't be visible unless you knew what to look for. Transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, a withdrawal described as a home improvement deposit for a project I had no knowledge of, a new beneficiary change request submitted while I was in the hospital that would have processed automatically in 72 hours. He was going to file while I was still recovering, I said. Not a question. Just the shape of it finally becoming clear. My attorney said nothing. She didn't need to. I did not fall apart. I want to be honest about that. There was a moment, maybe 10 seconds, where the grief of it hit me so hard I couldn't breathe. Not because I was surprised. Because I had loved him. Because I had cried real tears at our wedding and meant every word of it, and built a life with someone who was, at least in part, built of intention. I would never fully understand. 10 seconds. And then I went back to being the person I am at work. I called a second attorney, a divorce specialist, and explained what I'd found. She told me not to move money, not to confront anyone, and not to let my husband know what I knew. I called a forensic investigator I'd worked with on a fraud case in 2019. He was methodical and thorough and had no relationship to anyone in my life. I told him I needed to know about the rental car, about the driver, about anyone connected to my mother-in-law who might have reason to be in my vicinity on a Tuesday afternoon in November. And then I went home and I made my husband dinner, and I told him my head still hurt, and I went to bed early, and I lay in the dark with my eyes open, thinking about how good I had become at keeping my face calm when the numbers didn't add up. The investigation took 3 weeks. The investigator found the driver. He was a man in his late 30s, with a series of minor criminal charges and a very clear connection to my father-in-law's property management company. 2 years of contract work, paid in cash, almost entirely off the books. He had a new truck he couldn't afford. He had stopped answering his phone 2 days after the accident. My investigator also found something I had known to look for. An insurance policy, a large one, that my husband had taken out on my life 14 months ago. The premium payments were buried in a business account I'd never had reason to examine. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Whole Foods and read the investigator's report on my phone, and I thought about my mother-in-law saying then, "We handle it the way we handle everything," and I understood what handling it would have meant. I thought about my father's inheritance sitting in our joint account. I thought about the beneficiary change request that would have processed while I was still concussed and confused. I thought about how clean it all would have looked on paper. I drove to my attorney's office and I put everything on the table. The dissolution took 4 months. My attorney was precise and strategic in the way that makes some people uncomfortable and makes people like me deeply relieved. The prenuptial agreement was challenged on grounds of fraud. The recapture clause had not been disclosed or explained at signing, and there was evidence the attorney who drafted it had a pre-existing relationship with my in-laws that created a conflict of interest. The clause was struck. The asset transfers my husband had initiated while I was in the hospital were reversed. The beneficiary change was voided. The insurance policy was flagged. The information about the rental car driver and his connection to my father-in-law's company was turned over to law enforcement. I was told, carefully and without promises, that an investigation was underway. My mother-in-law called me once during this period. She called to tell me that I was making a mistake, that I was acting out of emotion rather than reason, that families go through difficult times and what I perceived as malice was really just the kind of miscommunication that happens in complex family systems. I listened to her finish, and then I said, very clearly, "I'm a forensic analyst. I find what's been moved and where it went and who moved it. I've been doing this for 12 years. You should have picked a different target." She didn't say anything. I hung up. I know people have questions about why I didn't see it sooner, why someone who spends her career finding financial deception walked into this with her eyes open and still missed what was right in front of her. I've asked myself the same thing in the months since. Here's what I've come to understand. The same precision that makes me good at my job requires emotional distance. When the person holding the document is also the person you've chosen to spend your life with, that distance collapses. Love is not a character flaw. It's just also not a defense against someone who is deliberately exploiting it. The prenup taught me something I should have already known professionally. Always have your own independent counsel review anything you sign. no matter who asks you to sign it, no matter how much you trust the room you're sitting in. The accident taught me something harder, that some people plan ahead in ways that are very difficult to see until you're lying in a hospital bed with your eyes closed, listening to them talk. My mother knew something was wrong before I did. She always has. I don't know how mothers do that. Some triangulation of love and fear and paying attention that I haven't figured out how to replicate. But when she told me to keep my eyes closed, she was giving me the only advantage I would have in that moment, and I used it. I left the condo in February. I found an apartment with good light and a second bedroom I turned into an office. I brought 3 plants and a lamp my father had left me, and I arranged things the way I wanted them, without consulting anyone. I still work in forensic accounting. I still find what's missing. But I took on a new kind of client this year. Women, mostly, going through divorces or in the early stages of marriages where something feels off and they can't name what it is. I sit across from them with the documents and I go through every line, and I explain what the words mean and what the words don't say, and I watch the particular expression people get when they understand for the first time exactly what they've signed. It is, in a specific and particular way, the most useful thing I have ever done. Last week, a woman came in with a prenuptial agreement drafted by her future mother-in-law's personal attorney. She said her fiancé had told her it was standard. She said she trusted him completely. I asked her to sit down. I got her a cup of coffee, and I read it with her, line by line, until we got to the clause that was not standard at all. She left with a different attorney's number and a much clearer picture of the road ahead of her. I locked up the office and stood in the parking lot for a moment with the cold air on my face, and I thought about a hospital room in November, and the smell of antiseptic and fake flowers, and my mother's hand on my arm, and the simple fact of keeping my eyes closed at exactly the right moment. Some things you can't control, but you can control what you do with what you hear. There's a version of this story where I never wake up, or where I wake up confused and trusting, the way the people who planned this needed me to be. I'd thought about that version a lot, how close the margin was, how much depended on one quiet moment in a hospital room and my mother's hand on my arm. What happened to me wasn't random. That's the part that took me the longest to sit with. The intersection, the rental car, the broken security camera, the beneficiary change request, time to process while I was still concussed. None of it was chaos. It was a plan. And plans like that don't come from nowhere. They come from people who have decided that your life is worth less than what they can take from it. That's a moral failure, so complete it's almost hard to look at directly. But here's what I keep coming back to. The plan failed because of character. My mother's character. She paid attention when most people would have looked away. My own character. I had spent 12 years building a mind that could read what numbers were hiding, and when the moment came, that mind was still there even through the concussion, even through the grief of understanding what my husband had done. You can't fake your way to that kind of clarity. It's built slowly, over years of choosing to be honest, when dishonest would have been easier, of choosing to learn when staying comfortable would have felt better. I think about the woman who came into my office last week with that prenuptial agreement. She trusted her fiancé completely. So did I. Trust isn't the problem. Trust is how you build a life with another person. The problem is when trust becomes a substitute for thinking. When love becomes a reason to stop asking questions. I signed a document I should have read because I told myself that reading it carefully would have meant I doubted him, and doubting him would have meant I didn't love him enough. That's not love. That's just fear wearing love's clothes. What got me through wasn't anger, though there was plenty of that. It was something steadier. The willingness to keep my eyes open when everything in me wanted to close them. Not just in that hospital room, but for 4 months of legal proceedings, of sitting across from my husband at dinner and saying nothing, of building a case the way I build every case, one document at a time, one fact at a time, without letting emotion make me move too fast. I'm not going to tell you I came out of this unscathed. I lost something I thought was real. I lost the particular safety of believing that the person sleeping next to you is fully who they say they are. That's not a small thing to lose. But I also found something I didn't know I had. The knowledge that when the ground disappears, I don't disappear with it. My mother told me to keep my eyes closed, and I did. But I kept my mind open. That's the only thing that saved me. If you're reading a document someone you love hands you, read every line. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And if you find yourself in a hospital room with your eyes closed and a choice about what to do next, trust the part of you that already knows.